Kesley Guernsey. Hi, Kesley.
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for coming in today.
You know, I went to the crepe shop for lunch, but that West Texas barbecue looks really good, and I'm not even hungry.
It is killer.
It looks, and we've had it. It's so good. But gosh, that looked delicious today.
Yeah, everyone loves West Texas.
Yes.
We've got a busy day for you today. You are, after your day prosecuting, you'll be part of a panel for Juneteenth. Every year they do a different theme, and this year it's political discussion. What does that mean?
You know, when I was approached to me and they said, we'd like you to be on this year's panel and it's a political discussion, my response was, you know, my position is not one that's political in nature. You know, it is a partisan position because the legislatures and the government says it needs to be, you know, but my position is representing all of Jackson County, no matter where on that side. So, but I am grateful for an opportunity to be with some really good voices in our community and be available if people have questions about the criminal justice system and how maybe politics, you know, should or should not, in my opinion, you know, be a part of that process. But it's the fourth year I've been on the panel, and so I'm excited for it and grateful that I was asked to come back to it.
All are welcome. It's free tonight at the MLK Center. Well, it's been a busy week, a busy start of summer. Unfortunately, we've had a number of shootings, and in this year, homicides, and there are, I think, going through the court system right now, 3 or 4.
Absolutely, yeah. So I know we've put out there that the one that happened at Warwick Court, that one investigation was submitted to us. We were able to authorize charges on that one. That defendant has actually already even had his preliminary examination, and that court's moved to circuit court, or that case, excuse me, has moved to circuit court. And he's being held without bond. The district court judges determined, you know, that was the appropriate bond given the facts of that case. I'm appreciative because while the others of them haven't been submitted, we're getting constant updates from law enforcement. This is where we are in the process. This is what we need from you in the prosecutor's office. This is what, you know, we need from them for investigation. So it's been a great back and forth as everybody's been inundated with a lot of these shootings lately.
So we've had, this week, there have been a couple of cases where you've had families of victims in the courtroom, very emotional, very upset. How do you balance what the need for justice is with what the victims' families feel they need to demand? Yeah,
it's one of the hardest parts of the job, is figuring out what is justice with the facts of the case and a defendant's individual actions and a grieving family. And you know, I am never been in that position where I have to be that grieving mother and feeling like I need to advocate for my child. But it's a really, really hard position in our world because we can't look at the feelings, right? We have to focus on what's the admissible evidence, what's the relevant evidence, what can I put in front of a jury, and at the end of the day, what can I truly prove, right? And we have ethical obligations that we can't just throw things against the wall and see what sticks, right? We have to be confident in what we can prove and how we can prove it to even be able to put a case in front of a jury. You know, and so given all of those things, the system is not always perfect. It just isn't. But we have to follow the law every single time. As soon as we stop doing that, the system falls apart. It just does.
I know one of the goals, and I think you talked about this when you were campaigning, is having speedy justice. And what have you been able to do? Are there benchmarks for the time it takes for a case to be resolved?
Yeah, you know, we have seen really post-COVID, you know, we saw a really big COVID backlog, obviously, right? Courts couldn't take place during COVID and, you know, the mandates that came down. And so we had to get out of that backlog. And we've mostly are out of that backlog, but we haven't maybe gotten back into the speed in which we tried and resolved cases in the past. So I've really tried to spend the last couple months in getting my feet wet of leading the office in what can we do on our side to control the speed of a case. We don't get to control a lot of it, right? The judges that, you know, decide the scheduling and their dockets and whatnot, but what are the things that we can control? And so we've looked at some of that, and we're looking at making some tweaks about the things that we can control to ensure, especially our victim cases, right? Sometimes those people are waiting 9, 12, 18 months before their cases are resolved. That's a long time to get some conclusion in a case. So we're looking at what can we control and what can we do to make these a little faster.
And it's interesting, you see high-profile cases that are on, the national headlines, like the Diddy case, where even before the case started, the prosecutor and the defense both said, this is a case that's going to take 3 or 4 months. And it's like, what?
Yeah. And sometimes they do. I mean, I think the longest case in terms of a trial that I have been a part of was just over 2 weeks. And that was long for kind of a local state, offense. But, I know people that are on federal jury duty for 6 months, when they get called a couple times a week for a full 6 months. So some of these cases can drag on. But really for us, it's the stage from charging to either the start of a trial or a plea or a sentencing. What can we do to lessen that? And some we can't. Some are going to be complicated, and everybody's going to need some time to work through large computer files, large phone data, experts, things like that. But a lot of them we can move through quicker, and so we're really going to focus on that.
And even though there have been some controversial sentencings, there are some that you've been satisfied with.
Oh, absolutely. Our judges have a very tough job. Our circuit court judges in particular, they have to balance all of these things. And in particular, they really have to focus on what is the relevant, admissible information in front of them. When it comes to sentencings, we only get to advocate for something. We don't get to decide what those sentencings are, us as the prosecutors. But we have been very, very pleased with a lot of the sentences. About a month ago, we had what our last SACI initiative cases. So SACI was the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, and it was grant funded to test all old sexual assault kits. So the kits that victims have done at hospitals, there were a lot of those that we found were untested. Government, state of Michigan came in years ago and said, that's not right. We're going to fund this. We're going to get these all tested. So all those kits across the board, statewide, were tested. They then assigned investigators, they assigned prosecutors to handle these untested kits. So Jackson in total had 3 cases that we charged, went to trial, and or pled guilty. And our final one was just resolved a couple months ago with a massive sentence that really was, and this was an offense that happened 15 plus years ago, 20 plus years ago, and still was able to get justice.
And it's because you got DNA hits?
Correct. So that's what comes out of these sane kits. Then they are tested, then you get DNA, and then you can. But then those investigators now have a cold case CSC, right? Criminal sexual conduct. They have to go back and track down a victim. They have to see if a victim is still willing to do this decades later, right? They have to still be able to piece together that case. And in the most recent one, actually, the defendant walked in and pled guilty to the lead charge, to the criminal sexual conduct first degree. And Judge McBain gave him a very, very hefty sentence that fits that crime.
Someone that knew it was only a matter of time before it caught up to them.
Indeed.
Well, besides tonight's event, you've got another one that you'll be participating in, and this is about elder abuse. It's a fundraiser for Safe Haven.
Yes, and this is actually the second year I've done this with Safe Haven. They asked me to come be on a panel last year, and they've asked me this year to somewhat expand on what I spoke about at the panel last year. And our goal and part of this is to help the community understand what we can all do to help protect our seniors and elders against vulnerable adult abuse and elder abuse and financial fraud and physical abuse, and what we as a community can do to rally around that communication, or that community in assisting them. It takes a village sometimes in those investigations. And with Safe Haven, they've actually applied for some grants that both Sheriff Schutte and I have signed on with to assist with in getting a prosecutor and some deputies in some dedicated training on how do you prosecute these, how do you investigate these, how can we protect our seniors and our elders in our community.
Yeah, and if you look at the police blotter, you'll see most of the calls have some element of domestic violence, and many of those
Exactly.
elder abuse as well.
Yep. And this Safe Haven program is a really fabulous program, and they're doing a lot to almost mirror a little bit of what the Aware Shelter does with some housing and with some emergency housing. So if you have a domestic violence response, right, and it's somebody who is a senior citizen and they might not have somewhere else to go, Safe Haven has an ability to provide some of those resources. They're a really, really good organization for our community.
Well, thanks for being part of that event and also for tonight at the Juneteenth kickoff.
I'm grateful to be a part of all of them. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Our prosecuting attorney, Kesley Guernsey.